need to mention that poetry is a form of literature that uses the aesthetic. Of course, the word aesthetic in Arabic means gamali, and rhythmic qualities of language. So language of poetry has two major characteristics. It must be aesthetic, and at the same time it must be rhythmic. Poetry uses the aesthetic and rhythmic qualities of language to describe feelings. This is the purpose, to describe feelings or events. How to analyze a poem? To analyze a poem, you need to know about, number 1, structure, 2, the theme, 3, the meter, 4, the rhyme, 5, the diction used in a poem, 6, the figurative language, 7, the symbols, 8, the devices or the techniques used by the writer or the poet. As for the structure, how the poem is organized or divided up. You need to build the structure of the poem by deciding how many stanzas or quatrains it has. So the structure needs, you need to know the arrangement of the sections or the divisions within this poem, the arrangement of the stanzas or the quatrains, and the relationship of the parts of this work, and by the parts I mean the stanzas or the quatrains, the relationship of the parts of the work to the entire theme used by the poet. This leads us to discuss what is a stanza. A stanza is a subdivision of a poem consisting of lines grouped together, often in recurring patterns of rhyme and meter, of course. Stanzas may also serve as units of thought, grouped together to convey a certain thought, a certain theme, idea. So stanzas may also serve as units of thought in a poem, much like paragraphs in prose. So we have stanzas or quatrain. A quatrain is a specific form of a stanza, a more narrow form of a stanza. A quatrain is a 4-line stanza. So it's a stanza of 4 lines. Number 2, the theme. Of course, as we have discussed before in our lectures in class, the theme is the major idea of a literary work. Number 3, the meter. The meter is the rhythmical pattern of a poem, the rhythm or the structure of the rhythm used in a poem. So the meter is the rhythmical pattern of a poem. A meter consists of a number of feet. What is the foot? The foot is the basic unit of measuring or identifying the meter. A foot usually consists of at least 1 stressed syllable and 1 unstressed syllable. So in a foot we have two syllables, one unstressed and the other is stressed. To describe the meter of a line, you have to know the foot name, the name of the foot, and the number of feet in each line. Of course, we have different types of meters. We have the iambus, or the iambic meter. We have the trochee or trochaic meter. We have the anapest or the anapistic meter. we have the dactyl or dactylic meter. Then we move on to define the rhyme. The rhyme is the repetition of the same sound at the end of two or more lines in a poem. Then diction. Diction is the author's chosen vocabulary. And how this kind of vocabulary is used to convey the major themes of a poem. Figurative language. Figurative language is a kind of writing that uses figures of speech, such as metaphor, simile, and irony, etc. Figurative language uses words to mean something other than their literal meaning, their dictionary meaning. What is a metaphor? For example, a metaphor is a type of figurative language in which a comparison is conducted without using devices such as like or as. A metaphor would say, for example, the black bat night. Just an example. Whereas a simile would say, night is like a black bat. So notice the difference. The black bat night, this is a metaphor, but night is like a black bat, this is a simile. When Romeo, for example, says, it is the east and Juliet is the sun, his metaphors compare her window to the east and Juliet to the sun. A simile is a type of figurative language in which a comparison is made by using devices such as like, as, or than. For example, my love is like a fever. My love is deeper than a well. My love is as dead as a doornail, for example. What is a symbol? This is one of the items you need to know about if you would like to analyze a poem. A symbol is any word, an object, a person, or an event that stands for or symbolizes, represents something else. Winter, for example, darkness and cold are real things, but in literature, they are also likely to be used as symbols of death. So, in literature, they traditionally mean death. Spring, light, and warmness usually or traditionally represent life. What about the devices or literary techniques used? We have many. Among them are alliteration and assonance. Alliteration is a poetic device where the first consonant sounds, or any vowel, and pay attention to this, the first consonant sounds or any vowel sounds in words or syllables are repeated. The assonance is the repetition of similar vowel sounds only in poetry. Good evening, dear students of third year simultaneous translation. Today we are going to have an analysis of William Wordsworth's romantic poem entitled I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, or The Daffodils. It has two titles, either I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud or The Daffodils. Let's read together the poem I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet couldn't but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For often when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils. This is the end of the poem. This poem, written by this great romantic poet William Wordsworth, opens with a simile. Okay, there is the as at the start to tell you a comparison is being made. The first two lines set up the first terms of the comparison. And I, and here this pronoun I refers to the poet himself. Okay, this is a subjective poem. Okay, the poet tells a personal experience of his own, which is a major feature of romantic poetry. The first two lines set up the first terms of this comparison. Okay, and I, okay, and I, the pronoun I, who wanders like a cloud. People wander, and proposing that clouds do the same, compares the clouds to people. So far, the comparison seems to have to do with movement. There is, however, another comparative term, okay? Another dimension of comparison, introduced through the word lonely. The poet is saying that the cloud, like himself, is one, alone, but only a human being can feel such solitariness as loneliness. Only humans can feel lonely. The next lines introduce two metaphors. When all at once I saw a crowd, then a host of golden daffodils. Here, the daffodils are compared to a crowd, a host, that is, to a group of people. Here, again, in contrast to loneliness, there are many daffodils, all together, close together. The image chosen for this group is, however, a human one. The image is a human one. A crowd or host rather than a bunch of flowers. The poet didn't use the word bunch, for example, but he used crowd, a host. So there is some sense that the flowers seem alive and human at the same time. Then the last line very gently okay, very tenderly, suggests that there is a further metaphorical comparison. The word flattering normally applies to flags or perhaps butterflies or to hearts when they become excited, when these flags or butterflies or hearts of people are excited. Yet, flattering can also apply to flowers here in this poem, as proposed by William Wordsworth, since it merely implies a light, waving movement that can describe the petals, بتلات, the petals of flowers too. Dancing, the word dancing, however, is more clearly metaphorical. Flowers dance only if you are comparing them to people. Here, the motion of flowers is definitely likened to a human activity. A deeper analysis of the first lines reveals that in the opening simile, a human person, who is the poet himself, of course, the I, compares himself to something inanimate, a cloud. And in the metaphor that follows, something non-human. The daffodils are non-human. Something non-human, okay, the daffodils are compared to human beings, human crowds and hosts and dancers, okay. In this stanza, there has been also a question of location. The cloud floats on high, but the daffodils are down low, beside the lake, beneath the trees. The poet himself, the poet himself too, isn't up in the sky. Okay? He isn't up in the sky either. Yet, we view him in some sense as high too. He is high as well, as though looking down from above at the daffodils. This manipulation of height and location is continued in the next stanza through the simile of the stars, when he says, continuous as the stars that shine. There is the as, okay, the word as, declaring the simile. Number and extension, okay, again take part in this comparison. The flowers stretch on like the numberless stars in the sky. The sky itself seems to parallel the bay. The word bay, al-Khalig, okay? The sky itself parallels the bay, that the flowers stretch alongside, they stretch alongside the bay, partly because of the rhyme that connects them. You know, Milky Way and bay, there's a rhyme. But another reason, mainly because of the repeating stress. He is continually repeating, stressing on the fact that what is above and what is below. If the flowers by a lake, stretching along a lake, if these flowers are like stars in the Milky Way, Then the flowers are like stars, and the lake is like the bay. And the lake is like the sky. The comparison doubles, okay, gets more complicated, connecting everything that appears on the two sides of this linking tool as. The word I, referring to the poet, is located somewhere between the stars in the sky and the flowers on earth. Okay? Because the ability to see 10,000 of flowers at a single glance implies a quite commanding position from above, which allows a person to see this huge number, 10,000 flowers. This stanza ends with metaphors that strengthen the earlier comparison of the flowers to humans when he said, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. Okay, this metaphor repeats the dance image again, but tossing their heads makes the comparison to human action more explicit. In this comparison, in this metaphor, the similarity between the two is more explicit, more apparent, clear. Thus far, the images have generally attributed human traits to the natural world surrounding humans, a kind of comparison called personification. We call this, personification. An image personifies something non-human by granting or transferring human features or actions or attitudes to it. He said that the daffodils tossing their heads. This is a kind of personification, granting human characteristics or descriptions to non-human objects. Personification forms the central image pattern throughout this poem, which is carried forward and intensified from one stanza to another. In the next stanza, the metaphor of dancing is extended to another. This object is the waves of the water of the bay. Now there is a triple comparison. How? Well, the waves are like the flowers, which in turn are like people dancing. Okay, we have the waves, the flowers, and the people. Triple comparison. The sentence, "A poet couldn't but be gay," suggests that the whole poem has taken place inside the poet's imagination. It didn't really happen only in the poet's imagination. The poet is on, as he says, on my couch. Okay? He is not out in the hub of nature. No, he's at home in his own couch, looking with an inward eye, a contemplating eye. Okay? In the sentence, when he said, "Then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils," the metaphor here is completed, made complete by suggesting that the dance is finally a dance of the heart of the poet himself. The poet sees himself in nature, imagines himself in nature, and then he sees nature in himself, reflected in himself. It's a moment of self-reflection or self-contemplation. It remains to say that the structure of the poem consists of 4 stanzas. Each one of these stanzas contains 6 lines, and the rhyme scheme is A B A B C C.